Hello, Americans. They have replaced what James Madison had communicated for us. And with our other founders, they enabled that to be declassified for themselves, for ourselves too. But they have it replaced. James Madison's plan caused the Constitutional Convention. James Madison's plan forced the Declaration of Independence rolls, forced people at key locations to have to break the rules of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, other countries that had even slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies. That's not clear, not because Americans didn't do their homework, is because the homework and the way it was written is collusion slash S with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, interbranch originally and still. That's collusion slash S replacing self-body rules too per use of location slash S. There are many countries involved with interbranch. Like, for example, the Connecticut Judicial Branch offices and the Connecticut Corrections offices in Wethersfield, Connecticut. They have roles with names I recorded hyper evidentially. They're pretending other. That's also how it's recorded. They're hiding World Trade Center predicate acts with further ones. Roles interstates and internationally timed collusions with the World Trade Center attack. Connecticut had and has. Wethersfield police had wire crimes with them and with the Stephen Stockoff. And I never saw Maria Fazina on a Wethersfield campus in my life. After I graduated, she sought me out. Her neighbors, to a Brian Bonin, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed he has people involved with the Board of Education and Route 3, involved with them in the state judicial branch office, in conjunction to that and to that, on Two Route Highway next to it. They have rules of wire crime acts and methods with Wethersfield police, who are involved with other natures of organized crimes with child abusers and people at the elderly homes and next to it at the same time as ones at next to the judicial branch offices, at next to the corrections, and that exploited the difference of their guilt with that. These are also people tied to people I don't know at all, and people I only know that were planting evidences, and I didn't even respond to them. People like that in life. Increasingly, these are people at and next to campuses involved with an identity theft, fraud, slander method, because they replaced what our founders had declassified. About how what the breaching method had roles, even replacing what black people as whites of eyes communicate by nature itself. And while they're replacing what our founders, and they have self-body rules, or that body is sensed. And and that's simultaneously right where nature's directions to what is practical reason, our proper principle treatments with our syntax. Even the experts like Judge Napolitano, an expert on things like, and he has other experts of the world and the names of the people of the sciences. Even the military has George Washington. They don't allow people to be honest about his extortion, or it would have brought up how he was also counter extorted and involved with the counter extortion of everyone else that was forced to make up fake reasons why they helped the American Revolution, because that was the only way they could defend themselves. Because for the same reason, the slavery had to be left entrenched. They wanted nothing to do with it. It was one of the things that was used to keep everyone collusions against themselves and everyone else, syntactically, therefore physically, and they could measure and maintain that. To maintain only having been remembered since before modern religious messages were born. The only people allowed to operate or capable of operating the names of countries A through Z, as the human species body of individual bodies. An individual species body made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. And there are a whole bunch of different individual species bodies, birds, fish. Each one of those different species made up of a whole bunch of individual species bodies. And we have both what nature communicates with that. It is generating all the group differences. And when we are not using its system and it's regarding its communications about positive and negative, and the quality of diffusion more so than neutrality. Neutrality is about the invisible but still discernible, which it is itself, distinctly part of itself is the invisible, just like part of yourself is the value of a cell body. Part of yourself is the value of the cell wall. Part of yourself is the value of that, which our appreciation of gases in their mixture and water in their mixture as life, that coming through cells too. So we could discern what it's showing us coming through cells. Its complete identity relationship to itself. Positive onto itself here, further and further, or our difference as its difference is forced away from Earth's special difference and the rest of the species bodies of individual bodies that have no criminal foreign influences per its system law. Nature itself teaches us about the law. I am not a lawyer, but we have black pupils, whites of eyes, and many know. See, even like the polling locations, the research campuses, all ages and natures of them, fire campuses, medical campuses, they have personal and professional roles, only three branches of government, all sides of criminal and civil cases, the lawyers, their sources, the news at the same time. The intelligence, foreign and domestic, with those same names and families through use of location/s. On a mass scale, they have readings of statutes and precedents where they leave out exceptions and they fake exceptions and they value that being and having been done. Forgiveness is not just because that's all they're capable of. For the method, I caught them with each age and nature of campus. Increasingly, people involved with the World Trade Center attack have roles with names next to with educators, the people I didn't have classes with, and they try to make a fake exception with a middle school class, which is increasingly involved with people from other parts of other cities and from other countries, involved with people from other parts of town who have roles of predicate acts on my street and abuses of little kids, various ways. And then people to make them self-value what they don't self-value when it's related to things like the World Trade Center attack. There's a quality of fact treatment nature. I'm not a lawyer. The names of the people cited, lawyers are recorded collusions with predicate acts with facts methods that are manifest relative to what I caught them doing at and next to each age and nature of campus and between them and the differences of them. There are kids from private schools. I don't know which schools they went to. People named Scalora. I never saw them on a campus in my life. Increasingly, they're involved with people planting evidences with Wethersfield Pizza House and the state judicial branch offices and their roles with people from other areas, all along Route 3, though, and conjunctions to it and to that. Have in Rocky Hill, too, as ones involved from Wethersfield with the Elm Street in Wethersfield. Has somebody to do with a bunch of people named Violet. Involved with a guy named Joe. I don't know his last name. Not a Joe DeMar, but he also has roles with along Route 3 and conjunctions to into that. And with a whole bunch of different countries. People from Korea, people from involved with FBI Director Robert Luskin, and people with judges, prosecutors, and their family members involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, first force. These are also people with the businesses and houses next to campus. The campuses like Hartford Hospital has roles with them, with the Demorals Market and with other businesses, with the FBI and other agencies. There are state police families and journalists at the same time with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. And their roles with intelligence, like people with the Afghan leaders and kids in other countries and the game thing, unmarked police forms and things like that, associated with David Smith, Jamie Smith, near me, per the police. And and themselves, years apart too, with the people they brought in. And then rolls with untimely death. Robert Rodriguez brought up the principal child abuser's campus to me. And a Kevin Dillon non-verbally recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Rolls also before and after the World Trade Center attack, intercities and intra-cities, with a whole bunch of people that have been planting evidences on all sides of my house and all sides of theirs, where and how they're all natures of investigations, investigators, and records keeping. The fire departments and the police are showing the people collusions against themselves. They have rules of all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders. There are people I never even met in life. They have someone next to you, and they have someone see you, and they're filling them in with fake things, fake ties, fake natures of ties to others. Others are just overtly pretending it. And on Facebook, the people that run Facebook since before they were Facebook, they had collusions with a whole bunch of other countries, but also a fight for foreign. That keeps, since before religious messengers, it got the people that could only operate the names A through Z of countries. It forced, tricked, persuaded them as the people, the locations, areas, and states names, everywhere the human species body is, to counter what it forced, that they had to counter syntactically, therefore physically. And then they did that. And then those people had to counter that. And no one discerned how it was doing this. Simultaneously, knowing that they would be making themselves incapable more and more of making short words, appreciated properly the way nature would be and is showing us, to use the names of the sciences, to use their difference, their value, not legitimate uses of the names of the people of the sciences. Have been, we have black people's rights of eyes to discern this. Oh, but that's a different subject. Exactly. It's not a different subject. There is a human fact-achieving nature, a hyperforeign that had collusion /S, northern colonies, southern colonies, only allowed with things if you're hurting themselves and others, and forced to pretend other at the same time. It never went away. All notions of practical reason, to use Immanuel Kant's phrase, he also didn't have free speech. Anyone who wants to debate that is going to have inherent to, active to, and progressive to their logic, and or to their nature of logic, demonstration /S of the same thing. But these are collusions with the people, with the aggression against the interbranch. They still don't have explained why and how there's a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. And not just that place. The founding locations A through Z, no one knows how to defend them syntactically, therefore physically. All exceptions, the exception nature, they're needing to hide others, so they're a big jail sentence. Kids don't even know that. These are the difference of guilt of the campuses. The names next to it are just temporary. Like WTNH has FBI with a bunch of people tied to a Fred Grouzet, involved with medical offenders of kids and the family members of them, of judges involved putting fake things in records and their delusions. The judges have delusions too, with the doctors tied with them, like a Leahy family faking transcripts with them. Distinctly, but non-distinctly, they're time collusions. And they won't get on paper, because these are also people since I was a kid pretending they knew me behind my back. To my family, people I know, everyone around me. That's why and how they get away with child abusers, leaders of kids, first force, and rolls with it. They're putting their kids, the way they have subject treatment, so they just change and fake what everyone says too. It's the difference of guilt of them, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, even when they're not in the same cases. These are predicate acts with facts, methods /S roles that no one wanted originally instilled, but everyone had no choice. So they said, so then the motivations we used to hide behind too, because the breaching methods rolls with your motivations, if you realize it or not. For example, if you deny the existence of that which is hyper evidential, For example, having black pupils, whites of eyes generated to us by that which is generating totally different individual species bodies. And each one of those individual species bodies is made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. So we could discern to an extent the identity of value progression generating this, which is not us nor them, but is all things anyway. Because not us nor them is its complete identity relationship to itself, except for one way, /S. We could deny its system and even have self-valued roles with it, as the breaching method only allowed, while simultaneously it knew everyone would have motivation because no one self-values it, and there would be styles, using that, but while they're pretending to be, they could speak for practical reason anyway, so to speak. I'll whisper creed, but not one name was his norm. Bach sings. Norm. Kind neutrality / neutralizing. Omegas, wall. K-N-O. Wall's neutrality / neutralizing. And we'll get into this, but in other words, there's an alphabet decipher. See alpha in the word alphabet. Jesus Christ is reportedly to have said, he is the alpha and he is the omega. This is cipher to be deciphered. Before religious messengers were born, already the campuses and the exceptions to them that they need too, because the nature shows us it is functional. How its complete identity relationship to itself and the value of that is distinct identity relationship to itself from the semi-nature relationship /S it has to itself. As we are shown, each body has this. We are made up of a whole bunch of individual cells. Cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall. Cell nucleus, or the value of it. Cell body and cell wall /S. And they're all held together in the water and gas coming through. This is in a way that's showing us too the identity is coming through, but also its identity as all things. Even if someone makes something up like art, it is distinctly the order of the finite, or the difference of the value of the smallest finite detail, the order of what is active and or grouped details, and what is simultaneous. The simultaneous, everything comes with the hyper-simultaneous. A distinct identity of simultaneous nature. That is not. We are distinct from the other species. While we are distinct from the other species bodies, we are non-distinct from them, and we are simultaneous with them. But again, there's this distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is not us nor them, while it is all things anyway generating it, so we can discern it to an extent. So if we pay attention to it as the ancients did, it comes equally with its complete identity relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that. Here, or that value is forced away from here, not as death, as forced space-nature transfer, and as criminal insidiousness, manifest. This breaching method showed all roles with it that they need to hide that and means to discern it in the past, because it's showing us about the fact, while it's showing us a breaching method was and is a scientific value that is tactically replaced from the syntax of the names of the people of sciences, even though our founders had declassified it for themselves for us to get it spoken free at last, their communications. They had no free speech, for example. not just because of the internationally monitored conversations with countries that had rules even with slavery forced here before our founders were born. That means that everyone had already hurt themselves to an extent where no one would be a unity or no one could be a nature of independence. And to the extent that was they could do that anyway, they could only defend and speak as a unified body. As qualities aspects of nature can't defend that and afford defense syntactically and nature-wise to overcome the breaching method. That which had slavery sickly distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies, because they knew where no one wanted rolls with it. But again, it had that and all against women sickly distinctly, while sickly non-distinctly. And all counters to that, or ignoring it, all syntax, all collusion /S to with the breaching method left out. Otherwise, that body is sensed by the sense and sensibilities, to use Jane Austen's phrase, of everybody. In other words. So offensively, mandated laws forbid, and they get away with this because they've been putting predicate acts with facts in every database specifically to help the identities of the law pretend they could they have integrity where they don't, and where and how our founders and nature itself is increasingly demonstrating the differences of their guilt with that, or overt criminal enterprises, private ones, even when they're not in the same cases. They have the same sequence shifts and collusion /S at the same campuses and relative body dumping spots and next to campuses and next to networks and rolls next to the World Trade Center attack. The same way, too, with all sides of a legal case. And the court involved increasingly with people involved with a sequence shift from inside the court, and increasingly involved with people from Connecticut that involved with the same stuff. Criminal and civil cases used to cover up libel aggressions tied to predicate acts with facts method /S and acts into the databases at the campuses. Spoken. Fake wire crime methods. Fake phone transcripts. Wethersfield police faked conversations with me as a kid and then as an adult. They have a Mendez police officer who's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people named DeMoro, involved with child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, their family members, and their neighbors, with multiple judges, too, with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake conversations and transcripts and ties to me at the Wethersfield police station with this Mendez officer. I didn't have one word of with an officer there. The whole time I went there and had my friend speak. And that was also him simultaneously recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with stacking multiple falsified police reports for the same arrest and refusing to identify themselves legitimately. I don't even know what his name is. He uses different names, apparently, though. I think Janito is one of them, per other people. I don't know if that's true. And those people are also involved with wire crimes of the Wethersfield police and federal evidences crimes with them and falsified police reports, inclusions with relative home break-ins in my area years apart. They have connections with youth /S of that. Also with the sense and sensibilities of the people, the difference of their guilt, or the people interbranch. They're not identifying themselves legitimately. There are people with the name Kalo and Joshua Schumack on YouTube, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They're involved with New Britain Superior Court and Facebook with a principal child abuser. He's involved with other digital crimes worse than upscare pictures they reportedly put him in jail for. And that jail had roles forcing that. And they have roles with a whole bunch of medical offenders, foreign and domestic, as the ones involved with multiple courts, personally and professionally, and their kids on Facebook too. There are people with the name Leahy. And these are people with identity theft, fraud, slanders, And the way they have the suburbs designed, and then too, the way they have all natures of investigators, they never stop being used. The difference of their guilt or the overt criminal private ones, they have all kinds of delusions too relative. The experts on the names of the people of sciences that they're shown they need to hide that. The breaching method shows them how to read the law. That's one of the things we could discern. How we could discern what our founders communicated is replaced. It has been. Quinnipiac University. There are, and people on off the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices and corrections offices and conjunctions to it and to that, like conjunctions to the Route 3, Routes 3, and like where it goes in a straight line, Hangdog Lane, and it turns into two-route highway. A bunch of people I don't know at all, and a bunch of people, and ones that I only know planted evidence is. They have collusions with people at the corners of streets too. Like the corner of the South Street Highway and Town Line Drive. It has rules with interbranch of all natures of investigation, even people tied to Joseph Lieberman and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with Wethersfield and Rocky Hill police departments, also at New Britain campuses, also with foreign and domestic families, with state police families, interstates, with the same house, and people tied to them from other areas involved with this. The intelligence community recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They influenced people to act, so other natures of investigators can film for fake things and or speak fake things and pretend things are debatable that are not, while simultaneously pretending things are not debatable that are, which is also one of the things we could observe relative to how you guys have replaced things like the scientific value of the human fact treatment nature breaching method as an answer communicated to us by our founders about why and how they did not have free speech, why and how they had to leave slavery entrenched. James Madison's plan was to counter-extort all these people that would never be unified because no one was allowed to an extent where, otherwise they would be sentenced, even if there were a majority of people, and that would be adapted to by the breaching method, even if there were everybody. In any grouping of countries, they speak about power, A through Z. They can't defend that and afford how the breaching method plays them, speaking about power. Tactical terror from how nature speaks about power / might. And the difference. We are a different human species body of a whole bunch of different individual bodies. We have eyes differently from the other species bodies. We have different color eyes while we have the same color eyes at the same exact time. What we are discerning is its difference / hyperdifference. And this is more probably how the ancients taught English. And with pantheism, and with exceptions, an exception nature and demonstration of the same. Because pantheism was led by how it is functional. Nature showed before the sciences became criminally foreign influence and no longer more and more afford anyone a quality of fact, human nature proper with convictions with short words and relative exceptions, the way nature uses it. Like people are right about the convictions when people of all ages do bad things, let's say in New York City, which is sickly distinctly, but it's also sickly non-distinctly, a victim of predicate acts method /S from Wethersfield, Connecticut, or from Hartford, Connecticut. The founding locations in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and Hartford, Connecticut, and in New York City, they have other communicated for those locations. And in the South, they have other communicated in those locations than our founders left to have communicated for themselves. What caused the Civil War was James Madison's plan. to counter-extort everyone from north and south to make them fight. Both of them still had roles with slavery because they still had roles with other nature. Every different women's difference. Oh, but that's because there was the safety. That was the safety because unabridged education and science was not in charge and is not in charge. Otherwise, they wouldn't be using their expertise as ones who know about how and why nuclear is dangerous because it can get hot or can be used as a bomb. We're supposed to be, nature itself is showing us the technology. The names are being used, A through Z. They're operated by locations, areas, and states' names the way the breaching method knew they would. And then they would have to pretend they could speak for integrity the way the breaching method knew they would. And to get away with it, they would have to, the breaching method knew that nature would be showing us negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures, where and how nature it knew would be showing us. Like, for example, a human fact nature breaching method is one of the things, those laws that were sickly, distinctly hurting women. Those laws that were sickly, distinctly hurting Black people's whites of eyes communication. Those laws that were sickly, distinctly hurting Native American communications, even between themselves. And then America's founders were born. Everyone had already been hurting and torturing each other. The only reason they the only reason James Madison's plan was with the power and might capable of forcing everyone to become the country and to agree about things the way they did. It's because they had to break the laws. It forced them to break the laws of the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, the internationally monitored conversations, the roles with it, only remembered known. Oh, but people, we have to feed our family. How many people say that with jobs that are they can't defend that, but they're going to pretend they're about free speech? Oh, before courts. You guys will say or do whatever, and then you have to change more and more what's actually recorded outside. Hyperprogramming. All right. Religion, trade, betrayal, tribes. So hyperprogramming is capable of being and will be led by how it is functional, where and how nature's identity is distinctly its own identity as a hyper-invisible, but still discernible. Distinctly from how its own identity is a distinct identity relationship to itself, but a non-distinct identity relationship to itself. No, as a it has three identities of relationship to itself. This identity of value progression is generating individual species bodies, made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. But it is showing us when we are using group differences, other than how and why it generates group difference /s. We are hyper-additional nature, but we have been separated from the pantheism as a hyper-invisible but still discernible, which is distinct. I mean, as invisible but still discernible. Pantheism. Any ism is about the invisible but still discernible. It is functional how we could check. See, but we are, you know, if convictions are leaving out finite details or relativity / hyperrelativity, because relativity / hyperrelativity is real. We have Black people's whites of eyes, and we have eyes distinctly from the other species' bodies too, but also non-distinctly from them to discern also, as is simultaneously such things are generated, even though they can be affected by us. Its identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. Here, for its system, and relativity to our short word, let alone the projection, or our difference forced here, including the difference of our words or our physics. This breaching method employed the words of the human species bodies to self-defend it. Roles as collusion /S, not even realizing, but to an extent that they were blaming other things, others, or selves for things that it caused and was and is maintaining consciously. Clearer than day, at campuses A through Z, sickly distinctly, but also not sickly non-distinctly. There are and have been collusion /S, and roles with you /S also of the differences of the guilt with that, or the names next to the campuses, or temporary next to them. Like with news, planting with their sources, planting identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake ties between people, at corners of streets, fake motivations. Even they don't even understand to an extent. That's why everyone brings their kids in. In other words, when how people will speak anyway, and they want to have subject treatments and leave things out, or they say, "Oh, are forced to a court." The only people have styles of logic that require that in the nature of their debate, that require self-value collusion /S with James Madison's plan having been replaced as what caused as what they declassified as what forced to be the Declaration of Independence, counterforced, nature forces, hyper forces too. But it also, we could ignore that because it also does the opposite too. In other words, we have to gain its identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that here, its way, or it forces it from here, as force-based nature transfer, as Leith of Hadith. Nature is showing us Earth's a special difference. The experts of space have been hiding what they believe about zero gravity. And if they could be, hurting us where nature is showing us we are right where it's about to be too cold or too hot. In other words, nature shows us things. Like if we use systems tactical theory from its own with positive and negative, you could have criminal and seditious natures of positive treatments and negative treatments. Like with regarding who you guys call your founders, or regarding the only founder that we know the name of specifically that knew about the plan. And that, in other words, we know all Native Americans were our founders, but not all of them knew the plan. There are proofs that some of them knew the plan of James Madison. But James Madison is the only specific individual of the human species body of individuals that we know that came up with the plan to do damage control from what took or had already had perfection, better than perfect possession / hyper possession of modern countries A through Z, right through their founding. That's what we observed right through the colonization. Then America's founders were born. And there was still that rolls with all the crazy things. Then their plan took effect. And there was still rolls with the crazy things. But we were directed to get out of there already. And to get onto the path, everyone keeps taking us off this path. They write acts. So everyone has to be re-educated. The re-education of America. We must be Romulus together. Romulus and Remus is a science. We must appreciate the identity that generates. The only increasing value here, it is force from here, not as death, as Leith of Hadith, force-based nature transfer. The reason there are those are two distinct identities of invisible but still discernible parts that come also with another invisible but still discernible part. And this goes with the alpha and omega in the alphabet. and how omega is the 15th letter. M, mother is omega, but mother is omega distinctly. M stands for mother, the 13th letter. And omega is left to right from mother, and is right to left from mother, distinctly from alpha. And its identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. The parts, in other words, the parts of time, for example, the past, what is active now, and the future. These three parts are three parts of the identity of forever nature that is generating more of itself through temporary / lasting space nature here. And it is using a special difference to communicate this to us, to more than just demonstrate it to us. There is a difference between verbal and nonverbal communications. And the exception nature role too, with not people's nonverbal communications being completed by others. So that's manifest right where even at countries A through Z, the three branches of government equally, they don't want to be collusions with things. They still have self-value collusions with it. See, we have forgiveness. And non-forgiveness, opposite of how nature shows us to use it too. Otherwise, we would have discovered not to make convictions and guilt, leaving out the breaching method, leaving out the hyperforeign, for example, that which had different countries, different colonies, different international companies, overt criminal enterprise, private ones, and roles, what they call educational stuff like that, while having been sustained the same breaching method against Native Americans, because it had been against every modern country, everywhere the human species body is. It forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded people to blame other things other than themselves for what it did. Sustained roles do that, counters to it. Sustained roles incapable more and more of discerning the answers that nature generates for us. And demonstrates when we ignore it, and demonstrates when we did ignore it in the past too. Ugh. We could use this to make hyper positives. There's a difference between making positives out of negatives as making criminal and seditious natures of positives out of negatives. Criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence. Where there are criminal foreign influences observable at countries A through Z as being shown to people, that is only allowed to be because it is here and there by operated mostly by the hyper-foreign. There are hyper-criminal foreign influences. We have to address this. This is why and how there are suburbs that were designed. There are houses that were built before America's founders were born, with slavery, torture, extortion method, northern colonies, southern colonies still entrenched. They didn't even have cars. Everything was tactically denatured in the landscape theater, specifically for when everyone come out of it to stay in it too. In other words, and sensing for the breaching method. It's not even debatable, this stuff. People get away with pretending it's debatable. The only reason they get away with it is relative to their sensing for the hyperforeign. But it has also been so long that even their sensing for the all natures of identities of difference needs to hide their what's actually recorded, the value of everything, the actual value of the names of people, the sciences, of the natures of all natures of investigators, of their campuses. Forgiveness is where people want to make convictions. If they leave out the hyperforeign breaching method, they're going to make mistakes. Exactly the way the breaching method knew they would, and maintained everyone needing to self-value that. And where they're self-valuing that, they're simultaneously self-valuing having been. Self-valuing how they could get away with debating what our what's known, but it's like the way they read it and buried it. In other words, it's known that James Madison had the plan that George Washington was using. That plan is inseparable from proper telling of any American history founding location at any colony or any Native American history, because they don't even remember their history. And the reason they could still to an extent, is because of some of the Native Americans, knowingly or not, they came together and they enabled James Madison's plan to work or not, where they would make people have to break the laws of not just of the International Minor Conversation, all that, the difference of the guilt and all. Everyone was sensing for the breaching method. The whole ocean is polluted. Black people's peer. Who disbelieves? Get me off the fake conversations with WFSB. They have a bunch of people involved with victims advocates years apart, involved with people involved with abuses of kids in my area, in Wethersfield, from other areas. And they'll tell you this. And please, anyone, there are people that weren't even in my classes that have been pretending fake things on Facebook with courts and their family members, people with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, in the military, people in the military I don't even know. And people I know, but I never had a word of conversation with people that are planting evidences. Increasingly, people tied to a look at them on paper, please. But the interbranch have been refusing to identify themselves legitimately since I was a kid. And those are also ones that are involved before and after the World Trade Center attack, as Connecticut had rules interstates with people from Washington, D.C., and the World Trade Center with all the countries involved. And Wethersfield police are forcing, confessing, demonstrating, confirmed. They have people from Saudi Arabia, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to them. Collusions with the Hyperforeign and the other countries involved with some Mendez police. And people were involved with them with the name Demaro and Scalora. And others, the police confessed. Also people with the name Sullivan. And more people involved with a Lance Cuddy. I never had a word of conversation. I don't know him. But people with the schools, further with the child abusers, they confessed his name involved. And these are people also with the FBI director, Robert Luskin, his lawyer, Robert Chevrolet, involved with some overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and years apart, child abusers, leaders of kids. Also involved with a Park Street, Lena's Pizza, with a Daryl Sullivan. And their roles with switching and forging names with people a bunch of ways tied to people from Wethersfield into branch offices, who also have roles with the business department. And some sexual calls years ago by a Detective Samud, I believe that's the same guy, but he's also switching and forging names with a officer Magnanos, or that's what he said it was his name. And that was also on the thing that has family with the intelligence at Central Connecticut State University and with East Hartford, Connecticut. And he made confessions about his roles with a Stephen Manos, who's one of the names that I believe he was one of the names that was in the court. I was in the court as an observer. Who was there? I was an observer in the court next to the World Trade Center towers, right before the World Trade Center attack, and the night before it. There are people with the name Scalora and Manos that were brought in by with predicate acts roles with a whole bunch of different intelligence families through time, more and more at Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut. There has been roles of predicate acts and predicate acts with facts method /S at other campuses. And I never had a class with Paul Zano. The only class I had with him in, I never had a word of conversation with him. And he was influenced by someone to keep that. That was when I was a senior. And then I had to stay back because they're trying to obfuscate this. I never had one word of conversation with the woman who had me stay back. And she repeated confessions about her roles with Washington, D.C. and with psychiatry. Increasingly, and people all along Route 175 from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield and conjunctions to that and to that. have roles with all kinds of predicate acts of facts and methods of them, and has roles with all kinds of sides of criminal and civil cases, and interbranch and news at the same time with same sequence shifts, as people who also have roles of predicate acts with facts and syntax and people putting fake things in databases at campuses influenced it from off them. And increasingly people with the state judicial branch offices and the corrections offices roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them with that. And the family members of them. Get them the heck on paper, Americans. You guys, with people from Wethersfield. I was only nice to everyone. Please, someone get on paper for them. A whole bunch of people tied to a police chief Centron have the corners of Elm Street and Wethersfield and Rocky Hill as one of the things to do. And a whole bunch of people on there as one's increasingly involved with, playing abuses of kids when I was a kid. And the people don't want to speak about that. And all exception nature shows too. The ones that are pretending that they're planting evidence as fake transcripts. They're putting fake ties, fake natures of ties, inter and intra cities, inter and intra campuses. You guys are not allowing things to be reported for the kids. And when there's exceptions, why didn't you say something there? In other words, non-verbally, a bunch of people with Central Connecticut State University in the Britain have roles with the federal agencies in other countries, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, with people with the campuses intercities, all ages and natures of them, including medical and fire campuses. And next to every place, including next to parks. Increasingly, people involved with parks trying to make it look, we're acting, trying to make it look like they know me. People with the name Perone. And I don't even know who is what, because they're trying to make it look, a whole bunch of people tied to a former mayor, Gold, and his family. I never saw a Joe Aiello at that park. He was on the side entrance to it. Something with people with the side entrance to a park, a Millwoods Park, and other parks. And that park near Hartford Hospital has rules. And from a line from Hartford Hospital to that park to UPS. UPS has people involved years apart with even if it was made up or whatever, there are rules with it because they have other recorded proofs of their corruption with foreign and domestic intelligence. But they confess to me as strangers that they have rules with shipping drugs through UPS. These are also people that are the people that are supposed to counter drugs. A bunch of people at Hartford Hospital have been attaching kids around their kids to fake transcripts, setting them up. They have rules with untimely deaths, and they know that was recorded and confirmed. Things like that on Facebook. Facebook has collusion. Well, it's not our job. That was our. See, but when it comes to their job, they have rules with World Trade Center predicate acts too, with the networks. Everyone's putting, well, that's what. Get them my paper. Get, in other words, they have all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders on there. Then you make people say bad things about the groups they're using. They have some black KKK theme, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, Italian theme, and sexual groups and differences. They use that to hide behind. Including, in other words, how they have those places like that are charged with that next to campuses. Increasingly involve all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, collusions that are only capable of being because of hyper collusion with that. Know how we have black people's rights of eyes. That's about identity theft, fraud, and slander.